Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're all back. We're going to move right along. Our next session has two speakers. We're dealing with issues in and around AI. Our first speaker will be Topher Maraffi. He's an assistant professor at Media Arts and Design Technology at North Carolina State University, an Epic Games educational partner, and is the lead faculty researcher at the College of Design Virtual Production Lab, and is on the Dean's AI Task Force and Curriculum Committee. He's been attending SIGGRAPH since 1996 in New Orleans, and this is his second presentation at SOIREE, so welcome back. And he will be followed by Michael Wagner, who's a professor of digital media and the head of digital media department at the Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University. He also serves as the program director of the Digital Media PhD program. Prior to his affiliation with Drexel, he held academic, teaching, research, and management positions at Vienna University of Technology in Austria, at the Department of Computer Science at Arizona State University, at Danube University, Krems in Austria, and the KPH Vienna Krems, Austria, for which he served as the rector or president. And his areas of interest and work include educational use of generative artificial intelligence, immersive audio, game audio, and Dolby Atmos, game design, gamification, game-based learning, and applications of blockchain technology. In other words, he knows a lot of things and does a lot. But this should be a very interesting session and discussion. And so again, for those who are just joining us, if you have any questions, and we encourage questions, we're looking for questions, please put them in the Q&A response box. You'll look at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. You'll see an icon with a question mark. It'll say Q&A. Please put your questions in there. I will monitor that, and I will get those questions to our speakers after they're done speaking. So we'll let each one speak first, and then we'll move into the questions, and we'll start with Topher.
Thanks for having me. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that I can play my fast forward video here.
Hello, I'm Topher Maraffi with NC State's MadTech. This is Exploring Gen AI Tools in a Virtual Production Pipeline. We collaborated with Colombian American film studio Alicardo on the award-winning short Las Fuerzas Extrañas. For pre-production, we used Blockade Labs' AI Skybox generator and Magnific Mystic Upscaler to create a realistic background in Unreal Engine. Then in production, we used AI for motion capture using Radical Live for the creature performance. I performed a virtual octopus and lighting in the LED volume, while actors were able to interact with it in real time. And in post-production, we created a disintegration visual effect using Higgs field AI. Alicardo was impressed by the speed and quality of virtual production enhanced by Gen AI.
So that was my fast forward video, and it was, since we have time, I think it'd be useful to play the actual short animation because it's less than 5 minutes. It's only really a few minutes long. And that way you get to see how those visual effects were fully implemented in the short. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is not available because it's still in the festivals.
I know you can speak. Habla. They didn't erase it. They buried it. Lo veo. I see it. I know your name. Kaisur. You spoke. Y el mundo reaccionó. Safe? From whom? I mean you no harm. I could handle it. No soy como ellos.
So I'll go ahead and cut off the credits here, but so that was a short that we did over 4 days in our NC State College of Design Virtual Production Lab, and we brought two visiting artists in, or it was a partnership, a company, a visual effects company from LA, Alicardo, who is Alex Restrepo, who was the actress in that short, and Ricardo Tobon, who has done a lot of work in games and blockbuster films for Weta, Sony, and DreamWorks. So he's got quite a lot of experience. I've known them for 20 years when Ricardo and I were both course directors at Full Sail University. And so when we got our lab up and running a little over a year ago and we started doing classes in it, we wanted to have someone in who had been working in the industry to do some kind of piece. And we came up with a visiting artist virtual production fellowship that the dean funded for $15,000. So our budget was less than $15,000 on the piece, and we brought them in for 4 to 5 days to get that done. We planned it out for a few weeks before they came in, and then we post-processed it in about a week after that to get what you saw there. And so the budget was small, the timeline was tight. It was the end of the semester. Um, I had two classes of mine coming in and helping out with it over those 5 days, and um, we set up all the sets and did the backgrounds. And where AI came in, I think, and made a real difference is in speeding up that process and reducing the budget, and while still creating a high quality finished product. And so, we used it in each stage of production. I'm on the AI curriculum committee and had been testing different programs out and having students use them in my various courses. And so this was a chance to really put that into a real world project. And it turned out that it worked really well when you're using it in that targeted way in the production pipeline. And we did use it in some other places, like for storyboarding. We used a little bit of it there, and but it was an original story adapted from Alicardo is a Colombian American studio, and they want to do projects that have this sort of mystical realism and connection to South America. And so they adapted the first science fiction novel, what's considered the first science fiction novel from 1908 by Leopoldo Lugones, Las Fuerzas Extrañas or Strange Forces. And it's since then we've put it out into film festivals. It's won several awards at sci-fi film festivals, and we're starting to put it into some AI festivals like that accept hybrid type of AI projects. And so, yeah, it's uh, one of the things that Ricardo was our keynote speaker at sort of our end festival that we had at the end of spring 2025. And he said that in his many years of working at these big companies, doing these, professional level projects, that he had never finished something of that quality that fast. And so I do think that the AI tools did contribute to that. And since then, we've been putting them into other sponsored projects that we're ongoing.
Okay, thank you. We'll get to questions and discussion afterwards. Michael, it's your turn.
Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. Well, first of all, thank you for the nice introduction. I did not expect that you would actually read everything, but I did a lot of work in educational technology. I started actually out in computer graphics, but over the last 20 years, I'm mainly active in educational technology. So anything that kind of can help education is something that I'm interested in. And Topher's presentation was really interesting as a starting point, because what I really want to really talk about is the challenges that we face as educators as we are moving into a phase where we can no longer really rely on the artifact that the students create as a proxy for thinking or for actually the work they're doing. And that is a challenge because our entire higher education system really depends on that idea that when a student turns in their assignment, we can assume that the work is done by the student, and that whatever we are going to kind of evaluate based on that artifact is representative of the learning effort that the student undertook, and that sort of has completely collapsed. So what I want to really kind of address is how do we deal with that? And the way to do that is really by thinking about AI-resistant assessment. I did a lot of work over the last couple of weeks and months in terms of figuring out what types of assessments are appropriate for the AI age and what types of assessments really help us identify what exactly we need to assess when it comes to making sure that we actually assess the student work and not the work of the artificial intelligence. Now, before I continue, I do need to point out that because that is a very controversial topic to some extent, that there is a huge difference between AI literacy and AI adoption. And that's something that's really important for me because a lot of professionals have, with sometimes very good reason, a critical refusal stance. They really kind of are not really kind of willing to accept that technology as something that replaces the human work that is done. And once again, that is a kind of a perfectly understandable response to AI. However, as educators, we don't really have that luxury. As educators, we really need to make sure that we are teaching our students to be literate, and that also means to be literate in whatever tools they're going to encounter in the real world. And that includes obviously also AI tools, and therefore we need to be AI literate. And the way I usually phrase it is in order to teach literacy, you need to be literate yourself. So even if you are critically reviewing the use of AI in your professional work, you still, as an educator, need to be able to understand what it can do so that you can teach your students appropriately, either in kind of helping them take these tools in their professional careers, or also kind of taking the same stance that you have as somebody who refuses AI. Or as a colleague in a leadership meeting actually yesterday, one of my colleagues said, I want to learn about AI because I want to learn how to hate it better. And that really kind of represents that idea. So in that sense, I just wanted to make clear that this does not mean a call for adoption of AI. What it means is really a call for becoming aware of that these tools are being more and more important in what our students are doing, and therefore we need to essentially be literate about it. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about 5 different approaches that you can take in terms of assessment. I'm not going to go into too much detail. At the end, I'm going to have a link to my blog where you can actually read a lot more detail. I also need to point out that there are a couple of issues that come with these, and I'm happy to talk about that in the discussion later on, primarily about scale and accessibility. But these are really kind of sort of the bigger groups that I find are really interesting for us. Now, the first method that we can approach that is AI resistant is the one that we're probably already using all the time anyway, at least if you are in a design-oriented college, and that is the model of the design critique. Because of the way students interact with their peers and with the teacher, that is a type of assessment that cannot be replicated by artificial intelligence. So whatever you're going to assess in a design critique is something that is genuinely representing the learning effort of the student. You can actually make the thinking of the student kind of visible. Now, there are different types of design critiques, obviously. We have the desk critique, we have the pinup critique, we have the jury critique, and it doesn't really matter which one you're using, and you might actually use a combination of those. This is a method that really allows you to assess student learning, even if the student is using AI for creating the final outcome or the final artifact. The second method, and that's actually the one that I'm primarily using, is the method of using video logs. And the reason I'm using that is because that is, quite frankly, the only method that you can actually use in an asynchronous online environment. All the other methods really require a real-time interaction between students and teachers, but this is one that you can actually apply in an e-learning course that is asynchronous. That is just kind of the idea that instead of having students write up what kind of they did or kind of submitting their final assignments, you have them create videos in which they talk about what they did, how they did it, and why they did it. And the way I like to do that is by instructing them to make sure that they are not using any scripts. So I really instruct them to be as natural as possible. And you would not believe how much information you actually get out by just kind of viewing these students, kind of explaining what they did and how they did it. So this is a surprisingly effective technique. Now, I do understand that the video models are becoming better and better. That's no question. But at the moment, at least, the friction in order to create something that is equivalent to a video log with the help of artificial intelligence is just too much. So at the moment, at least, this is something that works actually quite well, and that's something that I'm using a lot. The third method is the traditional whiteboard defense. Now, that actually has a very interesting history. I'm not going to talk about that, but you can essentially use that almost as an extension of the design critique idea. The main difference here is that you would have students kind of, or you would challenge students with challenges in class, and you would give them those in class and would have them think about and talk about how they would actually approach that in real time. So this is very important to understand that this is not an oral examination in the traditional sense. So we're not talking about them reciting knowledge. It's really about kind of explaining their actions as these actions happen. And that's something that can be very effective as well. Now, I have two more that are a little bit less kind of useful for the things that we do. The first thing is a Socratic seminar. That is something that you can do in a PhD program, for example. And the idea here is that you have students sitting in a circle, and then they have a sort of a structured way of interacting with one another. And what you can do with the Socratic seminar is you can really make the thinking of an entire group of students visible. So this is not an assessment that is useful for assessing one single student. It's really useful for assessing how an entire group of students works and how they interact with one another. And then the final one, which is also one that we are using quite often in our fields, is a role play assessment. Kind of if you're doing any education in game design, for example, what we do quite often is that we have a little kind of role playing where we have, kind of somebody take on the producer role and others are taking on different roles in the team, and then have them sort of complete a game almost like a company. And you can extend that. That is also something that is AI resistant, because once again, it really relies on the interaction between students in real time as it happens in the real world. And that's really everything that I wanted to talk about. If you want to kind of know more about these, as Nick mentioned, I maintain a blog where I write about all these things, and there are actually more than just 5, but those are the 5 most important ones. And the QR code takes you to that blog. And that's really everything I wanted to say. I hope I did not go over time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. And we have, as I said, because we have only 2 people in the session, we have 5. Please I'll start off, but we have no questions in the Q&A box. So if you want to type something in, please do so, and I will relay them to our participants. So to get started, we'll start from the most recent back. Michael, you seem to be concentrating on showing AI resistant tasks in your classes. Is there any place for the students to use generative AI in any of their design work? And if so, where? And how do you then balance that in assessment or how do you judge how much they understand in your assessment?
Well, I mean, the really interesting thing is that if you are actually using these AI-resistant assessment, it doesn't actually make any difference if the students are using AI tools or if they're not using AI tools. So in my classes, for example, I give them complete freedom, because we have students, quite frankly, who for ethical reasons don't want to use AI, and then we have other students who use it. So what you can actually do by being very, very careful on how you design your assessments is that you can create a learning environment where there is an equity between those students that are using AI tools and those that are not using AI tools. And what you're really doing is you are not really assessing the outcome, right? So if as Topher said, kind of there are certain things that AI can help you with that kind of accelerate the process. So a student who actually uses AI tools intensively might be able to get to a much more professional outcome much more quickly. But the thinking and the learning process, if you are able to make that visible, is still sort of the same, right? So you cannot really kind of assess the outcome as such. You need to assess the process by which the student gets from point A to point B. And if you do that correctly, it doesn't make any difference if students are using AI tools or not. And that's actually a really interesting thing. And I'm starting to notice that, especially I'm currently teaching a class that is a mixed class that has a face-to-face group and an asynchronous online group at the same time. So that's cross-listed. And it's really interesting. There are a couple of students in there that refuse to use AI at all costs, and there are others who are very open in kind of using it. And kind of in the past, I've experimented with forcing students one way or the other, but that never works, quite frankly. And so I found the idea to really create a learning environment where the use of the tool is irrelevant because you're really looking at what the thinking is and how they actually are able to get from point A to point B, as I said before, is much more appropriate for the current state.
Just to add to the discussion about the use of AI, I mean, we are dealing with it, and I'm sure many places are with how students either against it or exploring it. For our program, which we're MadTech, Media Arts Design and Technology, one of the things with our program is that we are engaging with emerging technologies, and AI is one of those technologies. So and it's getting to be really difficult to say take something through a process, through a pipeline, without using AI anywhere in there because it's being embedded so much, and because there are certain advantages. And from a visual effects standpoint, I mean, in the history of visual effects, I think, people would use whatever. It didn't matter as long as it looked how you wanted it to look in the final in the final piece. All our critiques are actually live in the studio, so there's not really a chance for them to use AI for that sort of thing. And then when we do videos or something, oftentimes they are going to be talking over them to talk about, if it's a game design or if it's a game, then they're demoing, then they'll be talking about how they designed it, which is actually, really difficult to fake with AI at this point. Although I did get a thing from Fireflies today that says that it can now handle or answer calls for you, and I don't even know how that. I don't
Yes,
really use it, but
so if I can jump in on that, essentially kind of the way I mean you can create a scaffolding in the class that kind of points or that kind of directs students into a particular type of how to for example, do the videos and how to actually do the narration on the videos. I think what I usually do is I give them a very low level kind of entry kind of thing where they just have to talk about themselves in order to get comfortable with the idea of a video log. And then by that kind of they start to really understand that it's actually much more efficient for them to just talk. And it's not really something, I'm not really evaluating the quality of the video at all, right? They can talk with all kinds of filler words and whatever, right? But you can see sort of how they think as you kind of watch them. And if you scaffold that in a certain direction, students are not really kind of inclined to use AI for that. And that really helps. Now, one thing I also wanted to say is that, kind of one of the challenges, and I think in our fields, we have actually a bit of an advantage because we are in a field where AI-resistant assessment is actually almost the standard, right? I mean, I don't think anybody here doesn't use design critiques. It's just something that's an advantage other disciplines generally do not have. The one thing that I think is really important to understand is that we are getting to the point where it's no longer really possible to differentiate if the outcome has been generated with the help of AI or not. And so kind of I see a lot of colleagues kind of thinking that they can detect AI. I'm sorry, you can't. And even if you can, the accuracy is not nearly where it needs to be in order to make a kind of a critical decision about, for example, kind of the academic integrity of a student. So there's just no other way as to accept that this technology is here. So even if you reject it personally, you need to plan your entire kind of educational strategy around the idea that the outcome is no longer really the thing that you can measure, because the outcome can be generated automatically by whatever tool is out there.
But it seems, I mean, one of the things that I sort of, you know, after using a lot of AI tools at this point, you know, there's still, even if they did generate it with the AI, there's still a lot of design choices they're making in order to get something that's decent, that looks good. It just doesn't come out that way usually by just typing in a prompt. So you know, and one of the things that we're sort of leaning towards are, and I think is a trend in the industry, is that the AI tools are moving more towards artistic inputs beyond prompts. You know, where you can actually, you know, draw on, put in your own drawings or your own video or your own sources, and then even draw on top of it like a storyboard to tell AI what to do. And in that case, I mean, you're really driving it from an artistic or creative standpoint.
So I've a few questions. There's a lot going on here. One, I'll just get them out and you answer anyone that you want. If process becomes more important than product, how does one determine who hire? On what basis is someone in the industry going to hire your students? If you're grading on process primarily, and their process is great, but their product isn't up to someone else's from another school, what happens there? That's one item. Another item is are there any specific times or places where you actually tell students use AI and try this? And the third one has to do with, well, actually, four more. Another one has to do with training AI so that it actually does what you want it to do. It's an experiment that I've been doing in my class. I mean, I have the benefit that I have a former student who's CEO of a generative AI company in Texas, and she's come up a couple of times and worked with the students. Now, that being said, it didn't work but not because of the AI, but because the students really weren't ready to train it. The software was advanced. These were fourth-year undergraduates. The software is needed, in order to be trained in a certain way, needed more input than the students were able to give it. But anyway, address any of those if you would, please.
Yeah, if I can just kind of do the first two. One thing I think that I kind of don't want to give the wrong impression, right? You still need to look at the output, right? It's not like process dominates everything, but sort of there's a certain assumption that with the tools that they have, the output that they generate will kind of generally be a good one. Now, if a student still creates, and quite frankly, if a student uses all kinds of tools and then creates not an output that is not up to the standards of the industry, that's still kind of bad, right? I mean, it's not. I'm not saying that kind of don't look at that at all. I'm really saying that the assessment or the kind of the learning is not really kind of represented by the output. It is represented by the process itself. And as I'm talking, I started to realize that I forgot the second one. What was the second thing?
Was there any particular AI tool that you actually tell them that they should be using it? And
I personally don't. I mean, I'm teaching primarily in the PhD program. So what I generally advise them to do is the use of literature mapping tools. So Research Rabbit, LibMaps, consensus to some extent, connected papers, these types of tools. So that's primarily what I'm using. When it gets to the creative things, I kind of, first of all, I'm not really teaching that many classes that kind of go into the actual production process. But I teach a little bit of game design, and generally what I do is I'm not really kind of recommending anything in particular. Some students use AI tools, some don't, but it's primarily in the PhD program for essentially writing papers.
Yeah, in our program, I'm definitely encouraging them to explore AI tools in a variety of ways. I think because I mean we have a lot there is a group of students that really do resist it and for ethical reasons and also I think misinformation. Honestly, I don't think they really understand how it works. Um, and we try to discuss that. We've had town halls and we try to discuss the ethics, the ethical issues related to generative AI. But at the end of the day, we're an emerging technologies program, and we want them to at least engage with that. If they then decide they don't want to use it in their upper level classes, that's fine. But and that probably goes to literacy. Um, but there's certain things like Hickman's immersive experience designer on ChatGPT is useful for them to rough out some kind of idea for an immersive project that we might want to do. Or the backgrounds that I mentioned in my video there using Blockade Labs AI Skybox generator. Well, I mean, that makes it easy for us to quickly, create an environment in order to put some kind of character or animation into that would normally take quite a bit of time for them and skill to create. So they can rough out things quickly that way and get their idea finished in a matter of weeks instead of a month or all the way through the half the semester or something. Um, I consider it more important that because we're a design school, that they're taking things through the design process and prototyping things. They don't have to necessarily create everything from scratch, which, other more, I would say we're sort of balance industry with the process. And so we want them to focus on both, but we're not necessarily having them spend all their time modeling or all their time animating. Um, if we can do it quickly, and that's what these tools are allowing, automating some of these processes. I used to spend, when I was a course director at Full Sail, I just spent an entire 2 months teaching them rigging. Um, and now I don't even really want to do rigging. If I can use a character creator to do it for me, um, like MetaHuman Creator or Reallusion or something, I will use that because that gets that really technical, tedious process done quickly. And then you can get on to the next stage of the project and actually animate. So I encourage them to try all of them.
Do you get ethical objections to doing that?
So yeah, there are some students that have just, heard a lot of things online. I think mostly I'm trying to educate them, and sort of some of the take away some of the misinformation about it, and engage them with it. But there's some people that have just really, they do not want to touch AI at all in their entire career, which that's going to be difficult if they're working in any kind of computer graphics, I think.
Do they
Yeah,
really?
I think there's a bit of a kind of a challenge that we have, right? Because on one hand, I do understand if students have ethical concerns. I completely understand that, right? Because there are many things that I have problems with, right? And then I consider myself a very AI positive person, but at the same time, there's absolutely no question, and we've seen that with Topher's kind of example, right? There's absolutely no question that the industry is going to adopt these technologies. I mean, just the dear upstairs neighbors kind kind of this little video that kind of came out, I think this week at Sundance. It already shows how you can actually appropriately include AI tools in that process. And students who are not capable or kind of have never learned how to use these tools appropriately are just left behind because they are not able to kind of produce at the same efficiency, let's call it efficiency, at the same efficiency that somebody can if they are using these automation tools, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a challenge, right?
So are there any other challenges that you see coming up with the use of AI or not using it that you see from students or that you
Well,
or
one of the main challenges I'm starting to see, and that is actually I'm also like Topher, I'm in the provost committee on artificial intelligence at Drexel University, and we've just signed a contract with OpenAI. And the reason for that is because we wanted to make sure that the system is actually kind of inside the university, right? So one of the main challenges that I'm seeing are really security and privacy concerns, right? So if you think about things like CloudBot or which is now called Moltbot, that essentially takes over your computer in order to kind of complete tasks on your behalf, those are all huge security risks. So I'm starting to kind of feel that every student almost needs like a computer security kind of primer at the very beginning. And that's also true for faculty, right? So you can't really, you can't, I'm hearing a lot about grading and using ChatGPT for grading, but you can't really do that because you can't put the student information into an external system, at least not in the United States. That's a huge issue. So kind of my feeling is the main conversation that we're going to have over the next couple of months is going to have to deal with privacy and security concerns in using these tools in a way that is not compliant with the rules of the university.
Topher, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Well, I mean, I think that yes, I'm really looking at trying to move more towards things like Comfy UI, which is locally on your machine rather than having to upload your data to the cloud all the time. It both speeds up the process, but it makes it more secure. It brings it, if you're working on something like we're working on sponsored projects, and some of those we don't necessarily want those out in the cloud yet. I mean, they're for a client. So in that case, it's better for us to maybe use something that's like Comfy UI, which is on the local machine. You also get more control. I think that's the trend and what you need to be able to use these in production. The lack of control with a lot of these programs, and they're all getting, monthly, they're getting more control in them. But you really have to be able, for what I'm doing with it, it's very important that if I'm doing something with performance and actors, and one of the things that I'm experimenting with is running metahumans and performance capture from an actor through AI to make it more realistic or reskin it, either stylized or realistic, in such a way that it goes across the uncanny valley to be a video. And so, that's kind of requires a lot of control. You don't want it changing your entire performance every time you do it. And so I think that's where I'm focusing is what's going to give me more control, and also make it more local. And
So,
safe
And
or
that
secure.
kind of brings me that actually brings me to another challenge that I'm seeing. I was teaching actually Comfy UI. I completely agree with you in terms of Comfy UI, right? So I actually had a Comfy UI class last year. I was teaching it almost a year ago. Uh, One of the challenges that a lot of us as educators are facing is the speed with which are things developing, right? So when I created this Comfy UI class, I had like a clear understanding of what I would do in every class, and then kind of every class I would look at the latest developments, and I could essentially
Everything
throw kind of
changes.
everything out of the window. Kind of
It's
do
not just
completely from
that.
scratch.
Unreal Engine changes every year too,
Yeah.
you know, and
So
it's like,
it creates a challenge that we need to constantly update our kind of our material.
yeah.
are either of you trying to take either some off-the-shelf software, developing it yourself, or modifying something so that it can do what you want and address some of these uh, issues of both ethics and control? Because they're related. In some ways, you can relate those two.
I did when I was teaching Comfy class, I also taught them how to train the diffusion models. The problem that we are running into that is, especially when we are asking students to work with their own machines, you are running against computing restrictions, right? So most students don't really have the computing power at home to kind of do these types of trainings. And quite frankly, when I did the class, the university was not yet at the level they would even consider kind of installing this software on our machines in the lab because that was completely not compliant. So I did that, but you are running against limitations in terms of what students actually have access to.
Yeah, and it's likewise at our state university. I mean, it's first of all, they're not going to put any new software in the middle of the school year. So, but you know, there's a lot of limitations, and they lock a lot of stuff down. So many of the stuff that I'm doing with AI, I'm doing it on my personal machine at home. Um, and I had to buy a 5090 processor in order to be able to really do that well. And the students, you're right, they don't have that kind of computing power.
One of the things that we did was we require students, this in design school, we require students to purchase their own workstations, and we give them minimum specs, but we also give them um, options to upgrade that. So we found that not every, yes, there are some students who are hardware limited, but there are some who are not. Um, and being a state school, we don't get that as much help as we would like, obviously, from the university or the public. But it also means that the differential between tuition and what they have left over to spend on other equipment might be more in their favor than they would from private institutions. So
I mean that quite frankly that works for a lot of the tasks. So kind of a running Comfy UI, for example, is something that you can easily do. It starts to fall apart a little when you get into the training issue, right? So if you want to, for example, train Flux, the Flux diffusion model, right? You can't really do that with a kind of a standard computer these days. You actually need something that actually is extremely expensive in order to do that. I mean, you can still do that at home, but not at the level that would be needed in order to get anything meaningful out of it. So it kind of that there is still a little bit of a difference in terms of what exactly you're using. So I would fully agree with you when it comes to using stable diffusion or anything like that, or even an image generator, right? Sorry, a video generator is kind of some of the Chinese models are actually kind of quite performant on a regular machine, but the training is still a bit of a challenge.
And for us, it's not just, you know, we're not doing just AI. We're if you have to, we're doing a lot of stuff with Unreal Engine, and that also requires a lot of computing power, and some of their systems won't, their laptops won't run it, or won't run it well, or it's crashing all the time. Because you know, a project can be 16 gigabytes very quickly, um, that we're working on. So, you know, all the technology is requiring more computing power, and especially if we're doing visual effects and animation and interactive, along with AI. So it's
I would actually love to continue this. However, we are now out of time, and we have actually less than 20 seconds or something before the next session is supposed to start. So Cheryl is going to be hosting the next session. I want to thank Topher and Michael both. This was terrific. Obviously, it's a subject that everybody's interested in, and this was good. Hopefully, it's only a start for our discussions. Thank you again.
Thank you.